What is up? My name is Killer K-Rail, and this is Highly Explosive Fitness, episode number 3. And I am here on behalf of Wild Warrior Nutrition and Pine Pollen Superfoods, and I'm going to talk to you about something fun today called HIT versus HIIT. Notice there's a missing eye over here, and there's 2 eyes over there. What is the difference between HIT training and HIIT HIT training? There's a very specific difference. So back in the 70s, this guy named Arthur Jones created this brand you may be aware of called Nautilus. And that was a form of exercise equipment that was utilized a lot of times in hotels and YMCAs and gyms and stuff like that were up and coming in the 70s. And everything had like pulleys and stacks of weights on them with resistance attached. Now, he created this little system called high intensity training, which eventually morphed into what's called high intensity interval training. But I'm going to tell you the difference between the two right now. High intensity training is more like a very slow rep process where you're doing a high amount of reps with very slow eccentric force. For example, if you're doing like a chest press, for example, on the Nautilus machine, you would do a very slow push and a very slow eccentric force, which would be coming back like this. So when you think of eccentric, it's a lowering portion for the most part. So if you're doing like a chest press, for example, you're pushing out like this, that's called concentric. The lowering portion is called the eccentric force. If you're doing a lat pull down, that's going to be different. Your concentric is going to be pulling down and your eccentric will be going up because that is where the focus on the muscle is happening. Okay? If you're doing a squat, eccentric is going to be in the lowering portion, concentric is going to be coming up. So high intensity training would be performed by doing a high amount of slow reps, coming down really slow. If you're doing a squat, you're coming down really slow, and then you're coming up, and then you're coming down really slow, and you're coming back up. Believe you me, if you do a set of 10 really slow reps of any exercise in the world, even if you're just doing body weight, that is going to be high intensity, super high intensity. So high intensity training was often fashioned by bodybuilders as well back in the 70s and 80s, and even present day to a certain extent. And it's based on creating a lot of tension in the muscle, in maxing it out with like one set, and that's it, and then you're done. Pow! And then you're off to the next exercise that you do. So oftentimes, high intensity training is performed with like say 5 to 8 or even 10 exercises, each done to failure with very slow range of motion and eccentric force, okay? So that would be considered high intensity training. And now one can say anything that has to do with like getting your heart rate up really high would be high intensity. For example, if you're doing like a circuit workout or just a plain old workout, and say you're doing bench presses, we'll go back to that, and in between each set of bench presses, you grab a kettlebell and you do a bunch of snatches. Your heart rate is going to be through the roof, and that's going to be high intensity training. So you can use it as a broad term as well, and say anything that has to do with like getting your heart rate up really high is high intensity training, because it basically is, okay? And you're not taking long rest breaks in between things. So that right there would be a good example of what high intensity training is. Now let's go over to HIIT. We're going to add an I in there, and now we're going to do what's called high intensity interval training. Okay, so this is a very popular buzzword that's been around for well over a decade now in all kinds of gym circles and home fronts as well. Okay, high intensity interval training is actually similar but very different than high intensity training. It is highly intense, there's no doubt about it, because your heart rate is going to be up and it is going to be slamming against your chest wall big time. Here's the difference. High intensity interval training, notice the extra I again. The I stands for interval, and an interval means you're intervaling between high intensity and low intensity throughout the whole workout. For example, you go to the gym, you get on the curved treadmill, which I like the curved treadmill because it is green and it is manually operated, and it's just like running outside because you actually have to operate it. You don't have to keep up with the belt underneath your feet. So you're going to step onto that curved treadmill and you're going to walk for 2 minutes, then you're going to jog for another 2 minutes, and then you're going to hammer it as hard as you can for 30 seconds. And then you're going to come back either to a slow jog or a fast-paced walk. And then you're going to go back and you're going to hammer it again for 30 seconds, and you're going to go back and forth at a set amount of time. For example, a 2-to-1 ratio is a common type of high-intensity interval training where you go 2 minutes at a light pace, 1 minute as hard as you can. Or you do the same ratio and you cut it down. You do like 1 minute light, 30 seconds really hard. And that's a basic 2-to-1 interval workout. And that can be applied to pretty much any kind of cardio out there in the world. And you can do this with a circuit format as well. Or you can grab like your TRX and you can do all kinds of cardio exercise on that, where you're doing something really high intense for about 30 seconds and you do something really light for 60 and you go back and forth. So basically the big difference between high intensity training and high intensity interval training is this, I would say, is more geared toward the gym floor and the weight room of the gym floor, that is. More in the bodybuilding world, you're maximizing like tension in the muscles and you're doing a slow and controlled contraction of exercises. High intensity interval training is more going up and down the scale between high intensity, low intensity, high intensity, low intensity, and it's more geared in a cardiovascular type angle, okay? So now you got something new you can put under your belt and talk to people at your next party that you go to and make yourself feel and look good and important as well. And if you do either one of these, you're gonna get in good shape, I promise you that. And if you blend them both together during the week, you're gonna get in even better shape, okay? So there it is. This is Highly Explosive Fitness. This is Killer K-Rail reporting live. And we just talked about HIT, HIT versus HIIT, HIT. Have a great day and make sure to go to Wild Warrior Nutrition and get all the latest of your pine pollen needs met because that's great stuff. Till next time, have a great day.